The sun was setting over the wide open plains of the Wild West, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Dust swirled in the wind, and the distant hills seemed to glow in the last light of the day. Samuel Hayes, a tall, strong man with rough hands and a worn face, rode slowly back to his ranch. He had spent the entire day tending to the cattle, fixing fences and mending the barn roof after a storm had damaged it. Samuel was used to hard work. He had spent many years alone managing the ranch after his wife had passed away. Life had been quiet, almost too quiet, and the silence of the plains had become a companion of its own. Samuel's cabin was small but sturdy, built from the timber of nearby forests. Smoke rose from the chimney, and the warm smell of burning wood mingled with the scent of the dry earth. As he rode up the narrow path, Samuel noticed a movement near his front door. He slowed his horse, squinting in the dimming light. There was someone standing there. A shadow, small and hesitant, shifted in the wind. Samuel's hand went to the handle of his revolver, his instincts sharp. He had learned long ago that strangers in the Wild West could bring danger as easily as help. But as he got closer, he could see that the person was not a man but a young woman. Her clothes were simple, worn, and dusty, yet she carried herself with a careful grace. Her eyes, wide and slightly nervous, met his, and she stepped a little closer. I can cook. I can clean. I can be quiet," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rustling wind. Samuel froze. There was something about her that was different from anyone he had met before. Perhaps it was the way she stood so cautiously, as if afraid to take up too much space in the world. Or perhaps it was the mixture of hope and fear in her eyes. Samuel studied her carefully. He had been alone for many years, and strangers were rare in this part of the plains. Yet there was a sincerity in her words that caught his attention. He took a step back and opened the door wider. "Come in," he said, his voice low but firm. The woman, who introduced herself as Clara, stepped inside slowly. She carried only a small bag, worn and patched in several places, and she moved as if every step had to be measured. Samuel watched her closely, still unsure if he could trust her. Clara explained that she had come from a nearby settlement, leaving behind a difficult family situation. She had no home, no friends, and no one to turn to for help. Her only hope had been to find work where she could, and when she arrived at Samuel's ranch, she had been exhausted and unsure if anyone would take her in. Samuel was silent for a long moment, thinking. He had spent years learning to rely only on himself. The idea of inviting a stranger into his life was unusual, even frightening. Yet something about Clara's quiet determination and polite manner softened his heart. He could see that she was not asking for charity but offering her help, and he respected that. "All right," he said finally. "You can stay here. There's a small room near the kitchen. It's not much, but it's warm, and you'll have a place to sleep." Clara's face brightened slightly, though she tried to hide her relief. She nodded and thanked him quietly. She unpacked her small bag and set her few belongings neatly on the wooden floor. Samuel watched as she moved through the cabin with care, noticing everything without making a sound. That evening, Clara offered to cook a simple dinner. She had brought some dry beans, a few vegetables, and a bit of salted meat that she had found on her travels. Samuel was used to eating simple meals, often by himself, but there was something different about this. Clara moved quietly around the small kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring the pot, her movements careful and precise. The aroma of cooking filled the cabin, and Samuel realized how empty the house had felt without the smell of a meal being prepared with care. They ate together in silence, speaking only when necessary. Samuel found himself watching her, noticing the small details. The way she smiled faintly when she thought no one was looking, the careful way she wiped the counter after each task, the way she arranged the dishes neatly before sitting down. There was a calmness about her that he had not known he needed, a quiet strength that brought a warmth to the room. After dinner, Samuel sat by the fire, cleaning his boots and checking the equipment he had used during the day. Clara sat nearby, reading from a small book she had found in her bag. The room was filled with the soft crackle of the fire, the smell of smoke mingling with the lingering aroma of the meal, and the gentle sound of the wind outside. Samuel felt something he had not felt in years, a sense of companionship. Over the next few hours, they began to talk. Clara shared small details about her past, how she had grown up in a nearby settlement, the hardships she had faced, and the reason she had left. Samuel listened carefully, offering small nods and quiet words of understanding. He did not offer advice or judgment, only a steady presence. Clara, in turn, seemed to relax in his company, her shoulders easing from the tension they had held all day. As night fell, Samuel showed Clara to the small room that would be hers. It was modest, a bed with a thin blanket, a small wooden chest, and a window that looked out over the plains. Clara thanked him quietly, her voice soft but sincere. "I will do my best," she said. "I won't be a burden. I will help however I can," Samuel nodded. "I know," he said. "Just be careful. The West can be harsh and I don't want anything to happen to you." Clara smiled faintly and closed the door, leaving Samuel to his thoughts. He sat by the fire for a long time, staring into the flames. He thought about the years he had spent alone, the endless work and the quiet nights. Something had shifted tonight. He had opened his door to a stranger, and in doing so he felt a sense of possibility he had not felt in years. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees and the stars began to shine over the wide plains. Inside the cabin, a small fire burned, casting shadows on the walls. Samuel and Clara, two people from very different worlds, had found each other in a moment of chance. One was a man who had learned to survive alone, the other a young woman seeking safety and purpose. Yet together they had begun a fragile connection that might change both of their lives forever. By the time Samuel finally lay down to sleep, he realized that the quiet of his cabin no longer felt empty. There was a new presence, a sense of life and warmth that had been missing for too long. And somewhere in the back of his mind he felt a flicker of hope. Hope that this quiet, determined woman might be the companion he had long thought he would never find again. Outside, the wind carried the distant sounds of the plains, the calls of night birds, the rustle of grass, the soft thump of a horse settling in the corral. The night was calm, and for the first time in many years, Samuel felt a sense of peace. In the quiet moments, he could hear Clara's soft breathing from her room, a reminder that he was not truly alone. The Wild West was a harsh place full of challenges and dangers, but within the walls of that small cabin, a new story was beginning, one of trust, respect, and the quiet courage of two people finding their way to each other. The first night ended with a calm understanding. Samuel did not know what the future held, but he knew that he had made the right choice in letting Clara stay. And Clara, despite her own fears and uncertainty, felt that for the first time in a long while, she had a place to belong. The sun would rise again, bringing new challenges, long days of work, and the unpredictable trials of life in the West. But for now, the cabin was warm, the fire crackled, and two lives had begun to intersect in a way that promised change, companionship, and perhaps in time something deeper than either had expected. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the wide plains, painting the sky with soft pink and golden light. Samuel Hayes was already awake, sitting outside his cabin with a cup of coffee, watching the horses graze in the corral. The air was fresh, and the quiet of the morning brought a sense of calm that he had not felt in years. Clara, already moving about inside the cabin, began preparing breakfast. The smell of fresh bread and sizzling meat soon filled the small space, drifting out the open windows into the crisp morning air. Samuel watched her work, noting how carefully she moved. Her hands were gentle but confident, her eyes focused on each task. It was clear that she took pride in her work, not because anyone demanded it, but because she wanted to do well. The thought brought a small smile to his face. He had never realized how much warmth and energy a single person could bring to a quiet place like his ranch. After breakfast, Clara helped with the daily chores. She fed the horses, collected eggs from the chicken coop, and even helped mend some of the fences that had suffered damage during the last storm. Samuel worked beside her, observing how quickly she learned, how careful she was, and how she seemed to anticipate the needs of the ranch without being told. There was a quiet rhythm to her work that complemented his own. For the first time in many years, Samuel felt a sense of partnership, the kind that went beyond simple companionship. As days turned into weeks, Clara became an essential part of life on the ranch. She learned the names of the horses, the routines of the cattle, and even how to handle the small repairs that Samuel often did alone. Samuel, in turn, began to share small stories of his past, tales of long rides across the plains, memories of his wife, and lessons he had learned from years of ranch work. Clara listened with interest, never interrupting, her presence steady and calm. One afternoon, the townspeople began to notice the change. Samuel, who had once been a man of few words, now greeted neighbors with a nod or a small smile. He spoke briefly with the children who played near the edge of his property, sometimes teaching them how to care for the animals. Clara's influence was clear, though subtle. She did not seek attention, but her quiet strength brought out a gentleness in Samuel that had been hidden for years. One stormy evening, dark clouds rolled in over the plains and the wind howled through the trees surrounding the ranch. Samuel was in the barn checking on the animals when he heard a commotion outside. A wild horse had escaped from the corral, galloping toward the cliffs at the edge of the property. Samuel grabbed a rope and ran, knowing that if the horse went over the edge, it could be lost forever, and other animals could be in danger. To his surprise, Clara was already outside, helping him guide the other horses away from the danger. Her calm voice carried over the wind, directing the animals with steady authority. Samuel was amazed. He had thought of her as quiet and gentle, but in this moment she was brave and capable, handling the chaos with skill and courage. Together they managed to corral the wild horse before any harm came to the animals. After the storm passed, they returned to the cabin, soaked but relieved. Samuel started a fire and Clara helped dry the blankets and clean the mud from the floor. They worked together in silence for a while and then Samuel finally spoke. "You were amazing today," he said, his voice full of admiration. "I didn't know you had this kind of courage." Clara smiled faintly, brushing her wet hair back. "I just did what needed to be done," she said quietly. "The animals, the ranch, it needed help." "I wanted to be useful," Samuel nodded. He realized that she had changed his life in ways he hadn't even imagined. It was not just her work around the ranch, but the way she had shown care, respect, and bravery. He felt a deep respect for her, a feeling that went beyond simple companionship. As the days went by, Samuel and Clara continued to grow closer. They shared small moments of laughter, like when a stubborn horse refused to move or when a mischievous chicken ran into the cabin. They talked more about their pasts, about hopes for the future, and about the life they wanted to build on the ranch. Samuel found himself opening up in ways he had not done for years, and Clara responded with understanding and warmth. One quiet evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Samuel and Clara sat on the porch, watching the sky turn from orange to deep purple. The world seemed still. The only sounds the gentle rustle of the wind and the distant calls of animals settling for the night. Samuel turned to Clara, realizing that he no longer felt the loneliness that had once defined his life. "You've changed this place," he said softly. "And I think you've changed me too." Clara looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "I didn't come here to change you," she whispered. "I just wanted a place to belong, but I think I've found it." Samuel felt a warmth in his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in many years. He realized that trust and companionship could come in quiet ways, in gestures of care, in shared work, and in moments of courage. Clara had shown him that strength was not always loud, and that sometimes the quietest people could make the deepest impact. As night fell, they went inside, lighting a small lamp and settling near the fire. Samuel worked on mending his boots while Clara organized the supplies and cleaned up from the day. The routine was simple, but it was comforting. For the first time in a long while, Samuel felt that life on the ranch was not just about survival, but about living. Over the following weeks, their bond continued to deepen. Clara learned to ride the horses with skill, helping Samuel with the cattle drives and even managing some of the smaller chores on her own. Samuel began to teach her more advanced ranch work, showing her how to repair fences, care for the animals during harsh weather, and even track changes in the land. They worked side by side, learning from each other, growing together. One day, while repairing the fence near the edge of the property, Samuel paused and looked at Clara. She was covered in dust, her hair pulled back and her face flushed from the sun, yet she moved with a confidence and ease that reminded him of a partner, not just a helper. "You've become very good at this," he said with a small smile. "I'm proud of you." Clara laughed softly, a sound that was rare and beautiful in the quiet of the plains. "I had a good teacher," she said. "You taught me well." That evening they returned to the cabin tired but satisfied. They ate a simple meal together, sharing stories of the day and plans for the next. Samuel realized that the ranch no longer felt empty. Clara's presence had filled the space with warmth, laughter, and a sense of purpose. She had become more than a helper. She had become a companion, a friend, and a steady presence in his life. As the night grew darker and the stars shone brightly over the plains, Samuel felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. He knew that the life ahead would have challenges, storms, work, and the unpredictability of the West. But he also knew that with Clara by his side, those challenges would be easier to face. For the first time in many years, Samuel Hayes felt that he was not truly alone. The cabin was warm, the fire crackled softly, and two lives had joined together in a quiet, steady partnership. Clara's courage, patience, and quiet strength had transformed not just the ranch but Samuel's own heart. And as they settled down for the night, Samuel realized that sometimes the smallest gestures, but a quiet whisper, a simple meal, a steady presence, could change a life completely. The next morning would bring more work, more challenges, and the constant rhythm of life on the ranch. But the connection between Samuel and Clara had been established, strong and unshakable. Together, they would face the hardships and joys of the Wild West, building a life of trust, respect, and quiet courage. And so, in the heart of the vast plains, two people, a man who had lived alone for many years and a young woman seeking safety and purpose, found in each other a partnership that promised hope, warmth, and a future filled with shared work, shared stories, and shared life.